When I heard about the theme for this year, I thought, wow, that is perfect timing. Now I know the last session was perhaps a little dark, a little bit vulnerable. Vulnerability can be uncomfortable. And that was his story. This session, in the arc of our hero's journey, is the descent. Now, I hinted at this morning in our centering practice. There are actually several types of hero's journey myths. The first one you're all quite familiar with. It's the slay the dragon myth. It's the achiever myth. Luke blows up the Death Star and everyone celebrates. You're overcoming an outer enemy. Now, as entrepreneurs, of course, you're all on that quest. And there reaches a point at which that is no longer enough. And I want to put a quote out there from the founder of Whole Foods, who many of you know. And he said, every time I had a personal breakthrough, Whole Foods, the organization, had a breakthrough. And every time I was ready to have my next breakthrough, Whole Foods would show me because of what I was complaining about in Whole Foods. So what we're up to here today is the next level myth. You could call this the descent into the belly of the beast, but it really is its own hero's journey story. It's not about conquering an outward enemy. It is about journeying into yourself. Robert Keegan up the road at Harvard calls the shift from the self-authoring mind, which so many of you are familiar with, that achiever mindset, to the self-transforming mind. And he says it's the shift from the problems that we solve to the problems that solve us. So if you think about that last story for a minute, that's his story. What is your story? What does it mean for you to travel into your own darkness when you hit a wall in your outer hero's journey? How does that bounce you into the inner work? That's what we're here to do today. And the story will be yours. Many of you asked me, oh, are you speaking tomorrow? And I said, well, no, one of you will be speaking. And one of these seats is a little hot, and I'll be asking the questions. I have the mirror, and I'm here to help you know yourself. The other thing about a vision quest as a journey into yourself is that there are several things that I've gotten up to in the last several years, one of which is awakening leadership. This is a forum group offering for leaders like yourselves. And at the core of the program is a retreat in Costa Rica that features plant medicine. You may know that this is becoming more popular, but there are what we call flight instructions for that kind of an experience. And that truly is what a vision quest is. But it applies to this session here now. So what are the principles, or what we call flight instructions for an inward journey? And these are some of the principles that we're going to be practicing with one of you brave souls here. The first one is that a vision quest comes from a Lakota word. And this is not my tradition or background, but I know enough to know that a hamblecha is a vision quest, which means literally you're crying for a vision. Crying for a vision. What does that mean? It means that any journey or quest that you approach requires earnest intent, setting your intention. So what if we were at the cusp of launching onto an inward journey right now? What would be your earnest intention? The second thing is that when you travel inside your own mind, resistance is futile. As the founder of the process we'll be doing today, Byron Katie, the process is called The Work, she would say, I call God reality. And when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. And that's humorous, but to stop and consider what the root of every spiritual practice and every religious tradition through history has been about. Consider this. So when you consider the ups and downs of your life, fundamentally underneath that, do you trust life? You can argue with reality, but do you trust the direction of the river? As the Hopi prophecy goes? Do you trust the direction of the river? Fundamentally, are you going to be okay? What does Brother David say the definition of faith is? Trust in life. So that will serve you well on your journey. The next thing is your ego is sustained through constant resistance. Resistance is what? Yeah. And it shows up in the form of judgment. This should, that shouldn't. Reality persists. Have you noticed you don't get a vote? It is what it is. It is what it is. So if you can turn towards whatever it is that's arising with acceptance, the principle of being on a journey, again, inside your mind, is that everything is happening for you, not to you. You don't have to like it. It's just easier if you do. Which brings up the next point, which is that everything is you. When you dream at night and there are other people there, are they other people? Or is that you again? So everything is a projection of your own mind. It's there to serve you. What I want to say about this, if you remember John Mackey again, very simple principle is when you find yourself trying to control reality, when you are in judgment, you will find there's this finger that points out, and there are these three fingers pointing back. Think for a minute about what this means about your core values. And this will be a kind of a summary statement of the work, what we're about to do today. Whose business are you in? Whose business is it if someone else shows up as a leader, is kind, is clear? Whose business is that, whether they do that? That's theirs. Whose business is it if you show up as a leader, conscious, clear, and kind, living your values? That's your business. That's the end of suffering. Notice when you're in judgment, whose business are you in? And could it be that you don't suffer? It's like, why aren't you living my values? It doesn't matter. Do I live my values? And it could be that you're a mirror for me where I don't. Carl Jung called the unconscious mind the shadow, or the shadow self. He said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will determine your life, and you will call it fate. It will look like it's happening to you. Unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will determine your life. It will determine your life, and you will call it fate. So how do you make the unconscious conscious? Good question. Another fun one. The truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. So traveling into the unconscious can be very vulnerable. In fact, it requires the opposite kind of strength than the outward conquering strength. It requires a vulnerable strength. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will determine your life, and you will call it fate. Fate. Another translation of that is when an inner situation is not made conscious, it appears outside as fate. You think about the wheel of karma. It's not that what goes around comes around. It's like we are the ones going round and round, stuck in the same pattern. Yes. When you have self-inquiry in your life, you start to notice some very familiar cyclical patterns. It appears aimless. And then round and round, up and down, the carousel of life. Catching onto those patterns can be one of the most transformational things you will ever do. The unconscious is also all of your potential. It's what's untapped. And what percentage are we using of it so far? 5, 10. Einstein used 8 or 10. So for me, what might be in that cave? I would say aggression. Aggression wounded me when I was very little. The whole path of martial arts has been a turning towards aggression. And we saw the fire that was on the screen the other day. It can burn you, but it can light your way, cook your food, and fend off your enemies. So everything is you on a vision quest. As Rumi would say, enemies are friends sometimes, and friends, enemies. So we are about to turn towards the thing that might have wounded us, and learn how to make friends with that. It's a real trick later when he says, Luke, I am your father. So once again, you cannot conquer this dragon. You have to befriend it. The feminine learns how to ride the dragon. The masculine likes to conquer it. So that's what we're doing. We're making peace with these parts of ourselves. That was my 3-year-old little self, dancing in front of the TV so my grandfather couldn't see his golf game. And boy, did he fire-breathing dragon lay into me. What was the message I got? Well, that isn't safe. So on came the stoic, responsible self. Then at 6 years old, when my parents, the only time they physically fought, and I peed my pants and ran into the corner of the room, then that legacy of I'm responsible and I need to even father and mother my parents was just cemented. So that's the kind of thing that is in your unconscious, in your cave. And thank you for going first. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Maybe this seems silly, but what do you mean by what's in your cave?
Well, what was the cave in the video clip? That might be the problem right there. So it's a setup. It is a vision quest. It is a journey. So he says, a domain of evil it is, the dark side. So it's already a symbol for going into the unconscious. And what's in there? What does Yoda say?
Only what you bring in.
Only what you take with you. Your weapons, you won't need them. What does he do? Brings his weapons. What does he get? He gets aggression back. And that's the trick. Once again, Luke, I am your father. You are destined, sins of the father and mother. You are destined to become what you do not heal and pass on. Great. It is. It's the catch box. It's the black box. It's the black box. And I want you to find what's in your black box today. And there's another black box inside of there too. So we are going to take the first step. Did that answer your question? Yeah, the shadow is all of the parts of yourself that you've disowned and don't see. The only way you experience your own unconscious is through projection onto other people. How do you know you're projecting? Well, does it inform you or does it affect you? Are you triggered by someone or something? It's a pretty good chance that you're looking in the mirror at a part of yourself that's probably unhealed in some way. And maybe just a couple other examples, actually, before we move into the exercise. So what is in your cave? What is in your unconscious? What is unhealed? What have you demonized? Yeah. I won't ask you explicitly to do that today. It does peel the onion to that place. I call it a time travel movie. Because if you've done a lifeline exercise in EO or YPO, you know where this goes. And then that's what we're projecting onto everyone else we meet who appears to trigger us. It goes back somewhere. Time travel movies, you go back, and what happens? You change one little thing, one line of the story, and the whole course of history changes. That's the power of this work. And before we use humor to deflect, that might be in someone's cave. Thank you, Rick, for going deep fast. That's a principle from you that I learned long ago. And what a beautiful illustration of the gifts that come out on the other side of being willing to go into the cave to descend. And again, how many of us trust in life? Is it going to be okay? If it's going to be okay, are you okay right now? So that's where this goes. Okay, so the next step is writing down your story. Again, it doesn't have to be, what you write on doesn't have to be the biggest, oldest thing. If you want to do that work, I encourage you to do it. And we're going to just create a container here. Of course, we know confidentiality, but let's hold a space that's therapeutic. So just active listening presence and earnest intention. That thing again about earnest intention. Of course, you get out what you put in, but it's more than that. What is your earnest intention?